Tokyo-Los Angeles Air was not a large, crowded carrier. It was the kind of airline people spoke of in hushed, impressed tones. From the moment a passenger purchased a ticket to the instant they collected their luggage at the destination, the airline aimed to make every traveler feel as if they had their own personal concierge. This small but ambitious company had grown quickly, fueled by word of mouth that praised its gentle lighting in the cabin, the carefully chosen music played during boarding, and the way flight attendants remembered passengers' names or their coffee preferences. In the spring of 20XX, Tokyo-Los Angeles Air offered a handful of routes between Japan and the United States, but its reputation for warm hospitality and modern comfort spread far beyond those flights. People said the airline felt like a carefully choreographed performance, where each crew member knew exactly what to do and when to do it. Behind that smooth facade stood a woman named Mai Nakamura. By day, Mai appeared to many as a successful business leader who made her home in Tokyo. In truth, she was both the founder and majority shareholder of Tokyo-Los Angeles Air. She had poured her savings into the airline, believing that air travel could be more than a simple means of moving people from one place to another. Mai's vision was to create an experience that felt both luxurious and personal, as if each passenger had their own private lift bridging continents. Unlike other executives who ruled from corner offices, Mai often wore plain clothes and traveled incognito. She would book a seat under a false name, slip on a pair of sunglasses, and observe how her staff treated every customer. That way, she felt she could truly understand what was happening on her flights, from the moment cabin doors closed to the gentle hum of the engines in mid-air. No one seated in first class on a Tokyo-Los Angeles Air flight would have guessed that a quiet woman wearing a simple cream-colored sweater and dark slacks was actually the person behind the airline's soaring success. Mai looked perfectly at ease as she settled quietly into her seat. She did not carry a flashy handbag or wear any obviously expensive jewelry. Instead, she chose to blend in, to watch, and to learn. Over the years, she had discovered subtle flaws that even the best corporate training programs failed to eliminate, small mistakes that could quietly pile up and damage an airline's reputation. With a private notebook in her purse, she would jot down notes about uniforms that were slightly wrinkled, about the way passengers were greeted, or about how carefully each tray was set. She paid attention to how flight attendants handled special requests, how they calmed an anxious child, or patiently explained a menu item to an elderly traveler. On one bright morning at Haneda Airport, Flight JL452 prepared to depart for Los Angeles. Aiko Sato, age 22, was in her crisp uniform and polished shoes. Only a few months earlier, Aiko had been a junior flight attendant on domestic flights within Japan, serving green tea and smiling as she offered pillows and blankets to commuters. Then, she had impressed her supervisors with a level of calm that felt almost too steady for someone so young. She had never panicked when a passenger fainted mid-flight or when a toddler decided to scream for half an hour straight. Instead, she had approached each situation with a soft voice and gentle gestures, carefully guiding every passenger back to a state of calm. That earned her a promotion to lead flight attendant on international routes. Now, for the first time, she wore a small silver badge on her uniform that read, Purser. Aiko's family had always encouraged her love of travel. Her mother worked as a tour guide on small ferry boats in Japan's coastal waters, showing visitors the hidden beauty of remote fishing villages. Her father was a language teacher who encouraged Aiko to learn English and even some Spanish. When Aiko had first told her parents she wanted to become a flight attendant, they had beamed with pride. They saw it as a way for her to combine her kindness, her curiosity about the world, and her ability to stay calm under pressure. Now, though, Aiko felt the weight of her new role pressing down on her like a heavy pack. She was eager to prove herself, but she also knew that one slip, one moment of carelessness, could undo everything. In the cabin near Gate 23, Aiko checked the flight manifest and introduced herself to the junior crew. She stood close to the window and watched as the plane's engines quietly powered up. Outside, the sky was pale as spring settled into Tokyo. The early morning light filtered through the terminal windows and cast long shadows on the polished floor. Aiko felt that familiar rush of excitement and nerves. She straightened her posture and cleared her throat. "Good morning, team," she said in a calm, confident tone. We have a full flight today. Please remember that our job is not only to serve coffee or hand out magazines. We are here to create an environment where every passenger feels safe, comfortable, and heard. If any family needs extra blankets, or if there's any confusion about the meal options, let's address it immediately. Understood? The junior flight attendants responded with soft nods, their faces reflecting a mix of anticipation and respect. Aiko spent the next few minutes walking through the cabin, arranging pillows and blankets in neat stacks. She made sure the seat back screens were clean and checked that fresh magazines and safety cards filled every pocket. Aiko paused by a row of first-class seats, looking at the lush upholstery and the small compartments meant for personalized service. She felt proud to be part of Tokyo Los Angeles Air, even though the airline's rapid growth sometimes made training feel rushed. She recalled the training sessions in which senior pursers lectured about the importance of attentiveness, whispering to Aiko that a great flight attendant could sense a passenger's needs almost before the passenger did. Those lessons remained with her now as she adjusted a tray table and double-checked a life vest tucked beneath one of the seats. When the cabin door closed and the safety demonstration began, Aiko stood near the front, projecting her voice so that every word was clear. She spoke slowly, showing each safety feature, pointing to the exits and explaining how to fasten the seatbelt. She noticed a woman in first class who seemed absorbed in a small, hardcover notebook. The woman's expression was thoughtful, almost serious, and Aiko thought perhaps she was a writer or an artist traveling for inspiration. She did not suspect that this woman was actually the owner of the airline, Mei Nakamura, traveling under a false identity. After the demonstration, Aiko returned to her station to prepare for beverage service. The cabin crew had a strict timeline to follow. Once the seatbelt sign turned off, they had exactly 20 minutes for hot beverages and snacks. Aiko moved with practiced efficiency. She opened a small cart containing gleaming pots of coffee, built from German steel, and the finest tea bags imported from Kyoto's tea houses. She had chosen to memorize the preferences of platinum-tier frequent flyers. Some liked their coffee black and strong, others preferred milk and sugar. When the moment came, Aiko started with those known as VIPs, because she knew that satisfying them early could set a positive tone for the entire service. She poured coffee into crisp porcelain cups as she walked down the aisle. Each cup jiggled gently in its saucer, and she carried them with two hands as if holding a fragile treasure. Passengers in business and premium economy looked up, smiled, and offered quiet thanks. The cabin felt warm. A low hum of conversation rose and fell like soft waves. The overhead lights highlighted the gentle undulation of luggage compartments and the fact that everyone had already fastened their seatbelts in anticipation of takeoff. Though the engines rumbled, the cabin remained almost silent, an oasis of calm before the flight truly took off. In first class, the elegant woman who Aiko had noticed earlier sat perfectly still. The tray table in front of her stayed empty as she read her notebook. Aiko approached her, offering a polite bow. "Good morning, ma'am. May I offer you coffee or tea?" Aiko's voice had that precise mix of respect and warmth that the airline insisted upon. The woman nodded once, and Aiko assumed she wanted black coffee. With a steady hand, Aiko poured hot coffee into a porcelain cup and lifted it carefully, dark liquid rippling. In that moment, Aiko felt a minor flicker of fatigue in her shoulders. She had been on her feet all morning, running up and down stairs to the offices, making sure that everything was perfect for today's flight. As Aiko moved to the next row, her mind briefly flickered to thoughts of her family back in Yokohama. She wondered if her younger brother had caught his train to university on time, or if her mother had packed enough snacks for her father's boat tour later that afternoon. She promised herself she would call them as soon as she had a spare moment on the long flight across the ocean. Lost in that warm daydream, Aiko nearly failed to notice that one of her shoes had caught on a section of slightly raised carpet near the galley. Then, just as she stepped forward, the tip of her shoe snagged and she stumbled for a heartbeat. In that split second, the porcelain cup toppled. Dark coffee arced through the air and splashed across the woman's lap. Aiko froze, horror flooding her at the sound of porcelain clinking against the armrest. The cup overturned again and spilled more coffee onto the woman's hands and the seat. A hush fell over the cabin as passengers turned to look, their surprised faces framed by the soft cabin lighting. Aiko's breath came in quick gasps as she knelt beside the seated woman, her hands trembling as she gently laid a cool towel across the passenger's lap. The hiss of the overhead air vents sounded far too loud in her ears, like fingers scraping on metal. Around them, the cabin was silent, the usual soft hum of conversation replaced by a tense stillness. Aiko kept her eyes lowered, afraid that if she met the woman's gaze she would see only anger or disappointment reflected back. She swallowed hard and managed, "Please forgive me. I will get help right away." The passenger, her face still, concealed by a shawl, pressed down harder on the towel as if to staunch the flow of her own outrage. Aiko glanced around, searching for a senior crew member or the flight purser, hoping someone more experienced would handle this delicate moment. In the next aisle, a young flight attendant hovered. Aiko waved her over, mouthing the words, "First aid." The attendant nodded, white-knuckled, and hurried to fetch a small medical kit. Heart-pounding, Aiko reached for a medical checklist that had been drilled into her memory during training. She sutured her voice as calmly as possible. "I need an ice pack, please, and gauze dressing." The junior attendant returned moments later with the items. Aiko peeled the plastic wrapping off the ice pack, then pressed it against the passenger's hand. The woman hissed but did not flinch away. Blood shone where the hot coffee had burned her skin, a stark reminder of how easily a moment of distraction could cause pain. Aiko dabbed gently at the burn, her embarrassment a heavy weight sitting in her chest. She felt every pair of eyes in the cabin on her, though their stares were polite and concerned. Not one person knew exactly who this woman was, but everyone sensed, through the expensive-looking silk scarf, the tailored jacket, the way she sat with composed dignity, that she was important. Seconds stretched into minutes. Aiko tried to keep her breathing steady. She offered cold water in a small cup, but the woman shook her head, refusing the drink. Instead, she pressed a damp towel against her cheek, her eyes narrowed yet distant. The cabin lights reflected off the single tear that slid from the corner of her eye. Around them, passengers shifted in their seats. Some whispered apologies to Aiko, as if she bore no fault. Others simply watched, curious and unsettled by what had just happened. In that moment, Aiko felt a whirl of shame that threatened to swallow her. She tried to remind herself, remain calm, show empathy, provide care. That was her training, but nothing in her training had prepared her for the moment she injured a passenger, let alone a passenger who exuded such quiet authority. The seatbelt sign clicked on and off as the plane reached cruising altitude. Aiko glanced at the sign, hoping it would remain illuminated so that no one would move about and add chaos to the cabin. She raised her voice, soft but firm. "Ladies and gentlemen, please remain seated. We are attending to an in-flight medical situation." A few passengers murmured in understanding, reclining their seats or continuing to read in low voices. No one dared rise, though they peered curiously at the scene unfolding a few rows ahead. Meanwhile, the woman removed the scarf from her lap and folded it carefully, revealing a crisp white blouse now stained with coffee. Her face was serene, as if she had rehearsed her reaction, and landed precisely on a calm exterior. Her eyes, dark and observing, rested on Aiko for the first time since the spill. Aiko looked up, momentarily startled by that gaze. At that instant, the realization flared in her mind. This woman might be someone important, but she could not yet confirm it, so she continued her polite ministrations. Gently, she cleaned the burn again, applying a thin layer of soothing gel. Each movement was careful, measured, as if she were handling a priceless artifact rather than a human being. While Aiko worked, the cabin purser, Keiko Okada, strode down the aisle. Unlike Aiko, Keiko was a veteran of countless flights and incidents, her uniform impeccably pressed and her expression unreadable. She knelt beside Aiko and handed her a small package of sterile wipes. Aiko nodded and took them, trying not to wobble on her knees. Keiko's presence inspired a flicker of relief. Perhaps now, a more experienced hand would handle this delicate moment. Keiko placed a reassuring hand on Aiko's shoulder, giving a slight nod. Then she leaned closer to the injured passenger and spoke with a calm yet commanding tone. "Ma'am, I'm so sorry this happened. Would you allow me to get you a fresh set of clothes and arrange some ice packs for you?" The woman lifted her gaze from Aiko, studying Keiko's face for a moment, before nodding once in acquiescence. Keiko shot Aiko a quick glance as if to say, "You did what you could." Aiko exhaled, letting go of a tremor she did not know she was holding. Within moments, Keiko asked a flight attendant to bring a blanket and an extra uniform shirt from the crew's stash in the rear galley. Another attendant fetched ice packs, wrapped in thin towels so they would not feel too cold on the skin. Meanwhile, Aiko kept her attention on the passenger's face as if that alone might guarantee safety. "Ma'am, if there is pain, please tell me," Aiko said, her voice soft. The woman's lips trembled just slightly as she nodded. "Yes, my hand hurts, but I would like to continue this flight. Please make sure there are no more accidents." Aiko bit her lip. The woman's fortitude impressed her, as did her dignity. Aiko could barely keep her own composure. She had never wanted to be the cause of pain. She wanted nothing more than to make this passenger comfortable, to restore a sense of calm in the cabin. She busied herself by placing a fresh blanket around the woman's shoulders, tucking it carefully so it would not snag on the seat's controls or rip the delicate fabric. She then poured a small cup of warm water and passed it over. "Here," she whispered. "Use this to rinse your lips if you like." The woman set down the cup, grateful but silent, allowing each wave of kindness to wash away her shock. Elsewhere in the cabin, word silently spread among the other crew members that this passenger was not just any traveler. An uneasy hush lay over first class, occupied mostly by business executives clutching laptops and folders. They exchanged glances, wondering whether the airline's owner might be on board. The rumor gained momentum when a flight attendant overheard a partial conversation. "She is someone important, I think. That scarf, the way she speaks." It was enough to sow seeds of speculation. Aiko, unaware of these whispered suspicions, focused entirely on her passenger's comfort. For the first time, she allowed herself to notice the passenger's calm professionalism. Every gesture was precise, every movement measured, not at all like someone panicked by a simple misfortune. It struck Aiko that this woman bore a quiet confidence, as if the world around her would always remain under control, even when coffee burned her skin. The flight purser motioned to a steward to inform the captain. Soon, a message crackled over the intercom. "Captain to purser." Keiko made her way to the cockpit, leaving Aiko to continue administering care. In the narrow space, Aiko checked a brochure on her tablet about in-flight burn treatment. She wanted to ensure she was following every step exactly, running cool, water for at least 20 minutes, applying sterile gauze, offering pain relief. But as she read, she heard a voice behind her. "Aiko." It was Keiko, her expression a mixture of urgency and caution. "Come to the cockpit, please." Aiko felt her chest tighten. She packed the burn kit away slowly and followed Keiko up the aisle. Passengers watched as they passed, some nodding politely, others whispering again. As they entered the cockpit, Aiko's breath caught. There, illuminated by dozens of dials and softly glowing screens, sat the very woman whose hand she had just treated. The cool blue of the flight control displays contrasted with the warmth of the cabin crew's uniforms. The woman's eyes were on Aiko, assessing. Aiko swallowed. Keiko stepped back, letting her stand alone before the passenger. Aiko bowed her head, voice wavering slightly. "I'm deeply sorry for what happened. I understand if you wish to file a complaint." The woman's gaze softened, though her posture remained poised. "You are the one responsible for coffee spilled in my face," she said. Her English accent was crisp, carefully enunciated. Aiko nodded, tears glinting in her eyes. "Yes, I lost my footing and She paused, unable to finish the sentence, the shame pressing in. The woman studied Aiko for a long moment. Then she slowly removed the scarf from her cheek, revealing a slight reddening of skin where coffee had splashed. Her eyes, dark and confident, looked right through Aiko's embarrassment. "Are you aware of my name?" she asked quietly. Aiko shook her head. No, ma'am. The woman's lips curved in a small, almost imperceptible smile. I am Mei Nakamura. I am the owner of Tokyo Los Angeles Air. Aiko felt as if the floor had shifted beneath her. She swallowed again, pressing, her hands together in front of her, guilt and shock warring for dominance in her chest. I had no idea. May inclined her head once as if to acknowledge the apology. Mistakes happen, she said, her tone calm but unwavering. What matters is how you respond afterward. Aiko's eyes flicked to the uniform's silver, badge on her own chest reading Purser, and for a moment she felt tears prick behind her eyelids. She had dreamed of being a flight attendant since childhood, ever since her father returned from a business trip with exciting tales of flight, paths and cloud banks. Now that dream seemed to teeter on the... Aiko returned to her cart with shaking legs. Each step felt heavy, as if she carried the memory of the spill in her pockets. The cabin lights glowed softly above her. Passengers watched quietly, their eyes full of curiosity. Aiko held a fresh cup of tea, hoping that these simple gestures might help bring back a gentle calm to the cabin. She reminded herself that every passenger deserved her full attention, even after the accident. She moved down the aisle carefully. When she reached a young family with a small boy clutching a stuffed toy, she offered the tea with a warm smile. Tea for you, she said, her voice steady now. The mother nodded and accepted the cup. The boy's eyes sparkled as he sipped. For a moment, Aiko forgot the burn victim in first class. She focused on the family's small world, the toy, the wobbly seatbelt buckle, the soft hum of the engines. She felt a small flicker of pride that she could still serve others kindly. Back in first class, Mei Nakamura sat beneath a soft reading light. Her white blouse still bore a faint coffee stain, but she had accepted the extra shirt from the cabin purser. Aiko watched as Mei carefully folded the stained cloth and tucked it away. The owner's hands were steady, her calm aura undisturbed. Aiko realized that someone whose own flight she ran still treated her with quiet dignity. That thought soothed Aiko's trembling heart. The cabin purser approached Aiko briefly, whispering, "You're doing well. Keep going." Aiko nodded and drew in a deep breath. She imagined a smile on her face and steadied herself for the next round. Though her heart still pounded, she felt a resolve settling in her chest. The flight would not be ruined by a single spill. Her job was to bring comfort and care, to remind each passenger that they mattered. In the aisle, an elderly gentleman asked for more water. Aiko filled his glass and knelt to speak with him at eye level. "Is everything all right?" she asked. He adjusted his glasses and nodded, thanking her for her thoughtfulness. In his seat pocket lay a newspaper with a large headline about a trade meeting in Tokyo. The pages rustled softly as he turned them. Aiko felt that, in that moment, she was part of something bigger, the quiet rhythm of human travel, of people moving through the sky toward new opportunities. Aiko's mind drifted to her own goals. She remembered her father's encouragement, to learn languages, to seek kindness in every conversation. She thought of her mother's stories about ferry, trips along the coast where even simple moments felt grand. Now on this trans-Pacific crossing, Aiko felt both fear and pride. Fear that her mistake could define her career, pride that she still had a chance to show her true self. Meanwhile, Ming Nakamura, in first class, turned the pages of an in-flight magazine. An article about new routes with state-of-the-art lounges caught her eye. She paused at a photo of a sleek lounge in Los Angeles. Her mind wandered to the future. New flights, bigger dreams, better service. She thought about how mistakes could be a mirror, showing where improvements were needed. She closed the magazine and studied her fellow passengers. Some slept with their heads tilted against the window. Others worked quietly on laptops. In each face, she saw someone with a story, someone whose needs mattered. At the rear of the cabin, the junior crew maintained a discreet distance from first class. They exchanged whispers about what had happened. They wondered if the burn would leave a scar, if rumors would spread that the airline's owner had been injured on her own plane. Some felt pity for Aiko, recalling times when they themselves had faltered. Others felt anxious, fearful that this incident might cost their friend her promotion. Through it all, the cabin purser remained composed, guiding her crew with calm gestures and reassuring glances. Aiko noticed a soft click as the seatbelt sign blinked off. She took that as her cue to continue with the meal service. Meal trays bore small portions of dashi soup, sushi rolls, and fresh fruit. The aroma of ginger and rice filled the air. Aiko laid a tray before each passenger, carefully aligning the chopsticks with the small ceramic rest. Each tray looked like a work of art, and passengers smiled at the presentation. Some thanked her in English or Japanese. Aiko offered her kindest smiles, trying to rebuild trust with every polite bow. In first class, May set aside her tray and looked at Aiko as she approached. Aiko felt a familiar rush of panic, but she steadied her hands. "Ma'am, would you like more tea?" May shook her head calmly, offering a small nod. Aiko poured coffee into a fresh cup instead, remembering that May preferred coffee lightly sweetened. The porcelain cup felt warm in Aiko's hand, and she took a moment to breathe slowly before stepping away. As she moved on, she allowed herself to hope that each small act of kindness built a bridge back to trust. Some passengers slept, others watched clouds drift by. Aiko walked the aisle quietly, offering blankets and pillows. When she reached an older woman who looked uneasy in her seat, she knelt and smiled. "Is your seat comfortable, ma'am?" The woman nodded, though her frown lingered. Aiko asked if she wanted an extra pillow. The woman's lips curved in a soft smile as she accepted it. "Thank you," she whispered. Aiko smiled back, feeling warmth spread in her chest. In that moment, she understood that the flight was more than the sum of its parts. It was a chain of small connections. From the cockpit, the captain's voice occasionally crackled over the intercom. "We will begin our descent in 1 hour. Thank you for flying with us." Each announcement felt like a reminder of time passing. Aiko checked her watch. It had been over 2 hours since the spill. She thought about how she would need to fill out a report about the incident, how she would face the questions from the ground staff once they landed in Los Angeles. She worried that there might be an investigation, that her name could be attached to a headline she did not want. Still, she tried to hold on to hope, recalling May's words. "What matters is how you respond afterward." In first class, May quietly observed the cabin as Aiko moved on. She noticed how Aiko paused to offer a small smile to a sleeping passenger, how she adjusted a blanket with careful hands. There was something genuine about Aiko's gestures. They were not just duties performed, they were kindness offered. May reflected on her own journey building the airline. She had started Tokyo-Los Angeles Air to create moments of warmth for people in transit. She saw now that the way her crew recovered from mistakes was as important as the service itself. Aiko finished the meal service and returned to the galley, where she wiped her hands on a clean cloth. Her body felt tired, but her heart felt lighter. She had faced the hardest moment of her young career and kept going. The flight would soon touch down in Los Angeles. She took a deep breath and whispered, "Almost there." In the galley, the junior crew gathered around Aiko. They offered supportive smiles. One crew member quietly said, "You handled that well." Another added, "Mason's reaction was kind. It could have been worse." Aiko felt tears of relief rise to her eyes. She nodded and gave a small bow. "Thank you," she said softly. In their faces, she saw empathy and respect. That filled her with gratitude. She knew that even though she had stumbled, her team had her back. After a brief rest, Aiko changed into a fresh uniform shirt provided by the crew. She touched the small silver purser badge on her chest. It felt heavier now, as if it carried lessons she would remember forever. She ran her fingers through her hair and smiled quietly at herself in the galley mirror. "You can do this," she thought. She returned to her station, straightening the supplies on her service cart. The captain announced, "Ladies and gentlemen, we are beginning our final descent. Please return to your seats and fasten your seatbelts." Aiko walked calmly to each passenger, reminding them to buckle up. Some sleepy heads bobbed in appreciation. Before long, the plane dipped gently through clouds, the city lights of Los Angeles twinkling ahead. Aiko felt her heart flutter at the sight of those lights, like a promise that the end of this journey would be kind to her. In first class, May reached into her bag and found a small sketchbook. She turned to a blank page and began drawing simple shapes. Clouds, an airplane in flight. She thought about how every safe landing mattered. She sketched a thin line connecting Tokyo and Los Angeles, marking it with a tiny heart in the middle. She thought of Aiko Sato, the young purser who had warmed her heart today. She let her pencil rest for a moment, capturing that moment of connection. The cabin grew quieter as the plane descended. Aiko moved along the aisle, offering soft words to passengers as she passed. "Almost there," she said with a gentle nod. "Thank you for flying with us." When she reached May's seat, she bowed. May's eyes met hers for a second. Aiko felt a calm wave wash over her. She smiled. "Thank you," May said, her voice soft yet clear. Aiko nodded once, feeling as if that exchange had washed away any lingering shame or fear. The landing was smooth. As the wheels touched the runway, a quiet cheer rose from the cabin crew, a small celebration of a safe flight. Aiko looked around, at the faces of her colleagues, each one wearing a smile of relief and pride. She felt warmth spread through her chest. They had all faced this moment together. She straightened her uniform and took a deep breath, savoring the end of the flight. For the first time that day, she felt truly at peace. As the cabin door opened and the warm Los Angeles air filled the plane, passengers began collecting their bags and stepping into the bright terminal. Aiko stood near the door, bowing gently to each person as they left the aircraft. Her smile was polite and steady, though her mind was still spinning from everything that had happened during the flight. She kept replaying the moment the coffee spilled, the long silence afterward, and the shocking moment in the cockpit when she learned the woman she had accidentally hurt was none other than Mai Nakamura, the owner of Tokyo Los Angeles Air Passengers. Offered her kind nods and quiet words of thanks as they stepped into the jet bridge. A few paused to say she had done a wonderful job. One elderly man patted her arm and said, "You have a very kind heart." Aiko smiled and bowed deeply. These words meant more than anyone could know. After such a stressful flight, every small gesture of appreciation felt like a drop of rain in a dry season. When Mai Nakamura stepped toward the door, Aiko stood tall and greeted her with a calm bow. "Thank you for flying with us, Ms. Nakamura," she said, voice clear and respectful. May paused for a moment, then reached into her small travel bag and pulled out a white envelope. She placed it gently in Aiko's hand. "I hope you'll read this later," May said softly. "Take your time. You've handled yourself with dignity today." Aiko held the envelope carefully as if it were made of glass. "Thank you," she whispered. May gave her a small smile and walked slowly down the jet bridge, her figure disappearing into the sea of travelers. Aiko stood still for a moment, her heart full of emotion, the envelope pressed against her chest. Later, after the passengers had all left and the cabin crew was cleaning the aircraft, Aiko sat quietly in one of the first-class seats. Her shift was technically over, but she wanted a moment alone to breathe. The other attendants were chatting quietly near the galley, giving her space. She looked at the envelope in her lap. It was made of thick, expensive paper. Her name was written on the front in neat handwriting, Aiko Sato. With slightly trembling fingers, she opened it. Inside was a handwritten letter. May's writing was clear and graceful. The letter read, "Dear Aiko, today was not an easy day. It was a test of patience, of reaction, of responsibility. I travel in disguise so I can see our company through the eyes of the people who serve it. I have flown many times this way, and I have seen many things. But today, I saw something rare. I saw someone who made a mistake but did not run from it. Someone who stayed, who faced it, and who showed care. You made an error. That is human. What matters most is that you responded with honesty, grace, and kindness. I was hurt, but I was also cared for. I appreciate that. I want you to consider joining our internal leadership program. You have potential, and if you accept, I will personally mentor you as part of your journey. I see in you what I hope to build this company on. Heart. Aiko blinked quickly, her vision blurring. She read the letter again, more slowly this time. Every word seemed to wrap around her like a warm blanket. She had feared she would be punished. Instead, she was being given a second chance. Not just forgiveness, but opportunity. She tucked the letter back into its envelope, holding it close to her chest. At that moment, the purser, Keiko, approached and sat beside her. "So," Keiko said gently, "what did she say?" Aiko smiled, through her tears. "She offered to mentor me." Keiko's eyes lit up. "You deserve that. What you did today, most people would have panicked. You stayed calm and kind. She saw that." They sat quietly for a while, watching the last rays of sunlight dip below the wing of the plane. It had been a long day, but one Aiko would remember for the rest of her life. In the days that followed, the story of Flight JL452 spread quietly among the airline's inner staff. Though no official statement was made, word traveled through respectful whispers. Everyone knew the owner had flown under a false name and that something serious had occurred in first class. But more than that, they learned how a young purser had responded, not with excuses or fear, but with care and integrity. Aiko reported for her next shift with renewed purpose. She walked through the airport terminal with steady steps, her uniform crisp, her badge polished. Inside her sat a quiet strength. She wasn't perfect, but she was learning, and that mattered. Her co-workers noticed the change in her. She listened more deeply, moved more deliberately. When junior staff needed help, she offered guidance without hesitation. When passengers were nervous or upset, she brought a calm energy that soothed them. More than anything, Aiko had learned how powerful small acts of kindness could be, even in the face of mistakes. A few weeks later, she received a formal invitation to attend the airline's mentorship program in Tokyo. The letter came with a silver pin in the shape of a small wing, the symbol of the internal leadership team. Aiko held it in her hand, the smooth surface reflecting the ceiling lights of her apartment. She smiled and pinned it to her uniform blouse. At the mentorship center, she was one of the youngest members, surrounded by more experienced crew from around the world. But Mei Nakamura kept her promise. She met with Aiko monthly, sharing her experiences building the airline from the ground up. She told stories of late nights in small offices, of tough decisions, of learning through trial and error. Aiko listened closely, taking notes and asking questions. Through these sessions, Aiko came to understand that leadership wasn't about being perfect. It was about being responsible, about rising after falling, about carrying others when they struggled. She began to speak more during group discussions, slowly finding her voice. One day, during a training workshop, Mei turned to the group and said, "Leadership is not always about standing in front. Sometimes it's about staying behind to lift others up." Aiko understood exactly what she meant. Months passed, and Aiko began leading training sessions for new crew members. She shared her own story, not with shame, but with pride. "I made a mistake once," she told them. "But that mistake taught me more than any textbook ever could. I learned how to serve not just with my hands, but with my heart." New flight attendants listened closely. Many had feared what would happen if they messed up on the job. Hearing Aiko's story gave them hope. She became a quiet symbol within, the airline of growth, of recovery, of kindness. One afternoon, after a long international flight, Aiko stood in the jet bridge as passengers left the plane. A young girl stopped and smiled up at her. "I want to be like you when I grow up," she said softly. Aiko crouched and smiled back. "You can," she whispered. "Just always lead with kindness." As the girl waved goodbye and disappeared, into the terminal, Aiko stood tall. The flight had been smooth, the passengers happy, the crew well supported. She tucked a strand of hair behind her ear and looked out through the airport glass at the clear sky beyond. She knew now that skies weren't always blue and flights weren't always perfect. But she had learned to fly through storms with grace, and that made all the difference. In a quiet office high above the terminal, Mai Nakamura watched the scene on a security monitor, a small smile on her face. She turned to her assistant and said, "Sometimes it takes one tough flight to find someone, truly ready to soar." Months passed like the soft drifting of clouds across the sky. Aiko Sato continued to grow, not just as a flight attendant, but as a leader, a mentor, and a person of quiet strength. Each new flight brought her fresh faces, new stories, and small opportunities to offer kindness. Though the memory of the coffee spill remained in her heart, it no longer made her feel ashamed. It had become a turning point, a lesson, a reminder that even mistakes could lead to something meaningful. One morning, as Aiko prepared for a flight from Los Angeles back to Tokyo, she stood in front of the crew lounge mirror and straightened her uniform. The silver wing pin from the mentorship program sat proudly on her chest. She touched it gently, remembering Mai Nakamura's letter and the calm tone of her voice that day in the cockpit. Aiko still carried the envelope in her travel bag. Whenever she felt nervous or unsure, she read the letter again and reminded herself how far she had come. That morning's flight, JL-873, had several new crew members on board. Some of them had only completed their training a few weeks earlier. They were excited, nervous, and eager to prove themselves, just like Aiko had been not so long ago. As senior purser on the flight, Aiko took time before boarding to speak with them gently. "Remember," she said with a warm smile, "passengers don't always remember the announcements or the food, but they will always remember how you made them feel." One of the new flight attendants, a shy young woman named Hana, looked at Aiko with admiration. "Is it true," she asked quietly, "that you once spilled coffee on the airline owner?" The question made Aiko pause. For a second she considered brushing it off, but instead she smiled and nodded. "Yes," she replied softly. "I did, and it changed my life in a way I never expected." The other crew members leaned in with wide eyes, eager to hear more. Aiko shared a brief version of the story, how she had made a mistake, stayed calm, showed care, and received forgiveness instead of punishment. She didn't dramatize it. She simply told the truth. And in doing so, she gave the new crew members something powerful, the courage to keep going, even if things went wrong. The flight to Tokyo went smoothly. The passengers were kind, the weather was calm, and the crew worked together with ease. Aiko checked on everyone throughout the flight, offering support, guidance, and the occasional smile when someone looked unsure. She reminded herself that leadership was not about control. It was about connection. When the plane landed in Tokyo, a soft drizzle painted the windows with tiny silver streaks. Aiko stood by the exit once more, bowing to passengers as they left the aircraft. An elderly woman stopped and said, "You have a gentle heart, dear. It shows." Aiko bowed again, her eyes shining. Comments like that, simple as they were, reminded her why she loved her work so much. Later that evening, Aiko returned home to her small but cozy apartment. She placed her uniform neatly in the laundry basket and hung the silver pin back in its special box on her desk. She made a cup of warm tea and opened her journal, where she wrote a new entry. "Today, I saw myself in the eyes of a new crew member, young, nervous, and hopeful. I remember being that person. I am still learning, still growing, but now I also teach, and that is a beautiful part of the journey." Just as she finished writing, her phone buzzed. It was an email from Tokyo Los Angeles Air's head office. The subject line read, "Leadership Invitation, Regional Training Lead." Aiko blinked. Her hands froze above the keyboard for a moment. Then, with careful excitement, she opened the message. It read, "Dear Aiko Sato, your growth and dedication have not gone unnoticed. We would like to invite you to become a regional training lead for our new hires in East Asia. This role will include planning workshops, mentoring new staff, and assisting with service quality development. Your story, your compassion, and your leadership make you the perfect candidate." Aiko covered her mouth with her hand. A tear escaped her eye, not from sadness, but from the quiet joy that filled her heart. She thought about the journey, from the accident on that flight to this new opportunity. Her heart swelled with gratitude. The next morning, she arrived at headquarters wearing her uniform and silver pin. She met with Mei Nakamura in a sunlit meeting room overlooking the Tokyo skyline. Mei was dressed in her usual elegant, understated style. Her calm presence was still inspiring. "You've done well, Aiko," Mei said as she poured tea for them, both. "You've grown not only as a flight attendant but as someone others look up to. That's real leadership." Aiko bowed deeply. "Thank you for believing in me even when I made a mistake." Mei smiled. "It wasn't the mistake that defined you. It was your response to it." They sat for a while, sipping tea and talking about the future. Mei shared her vision for the airline's next chapter: new routes, new aircraft, and a new focus on emotional intelligence in service training. Aiko listened carefully, taking notes, already thinking of ideas she could bring to the program. Over the next few months, Aiko stepped into her new role with grace. She visited training centers in Osaka, Seoul, and Taipei, sharing her story and listening to others. She encouraged trainees to speak openly, to ask for help when needed, and to always treat passengers with true care. Each time she stood in front of a new class, she felt a mix of nervousness and excitement. But she remembered Mei's words and found strength in them. Her story, once a painful memory, now inspired others. One afternoon, during a training session in Seoul, a young man raised his hand and said, "Miss Sato, I was afraid to come into this job because I thought if I made a mistake I'd be sent home. But your story taught me that even mistakes can lead to better things." Aiko smiled warmly. "We are human first," she said. "And sometimes the strongest leaders are the ones who've made mistakes and chosen to grow from them." Back in Tokyo, Aiko often visited the airport lounge before flights, greeting staff, checking on service quality, and ensuring passengers felt welcome. She never forgot the feeling of standing alone in the aisle that day after the coffee spill. But now she carried that memory not as a weight, but as a light. The day came when she received a new badge, Senior Regional Training Director. She held it in her palm and smiled quietly. It wasn't just a title, it was a reflection of a journey built on grace, humility, and the courage to rise again. And, sometimes on quiet evenings, she would pull out the old envelope from Mei Nakamura, the one that changed everything. She kept it safe in a wooden box, along with her first flight certificate and a photo of her first crew. It reminded her of who she was and how far she had come. From a young flight attendant with shaking hands to a respected leader guiding others, Aiko's story became one of hope and resilience. And as the aircraft continued to fly between cities and skies, so did her story, passed from one crew member to another, whispered in training halls and remembered with warmth. All because of one moment, one mistake, and one powerful response that turned it all around.